Ah, you obviously know Kung Fu.
Hey, this is Loyd Bateman. I'm the fight coordinator for Loki, and this is the Kung Fu Drive-In Podcast.
Welcome to the Kung Fu Drive-In Podcast. Adjust your speaker box, sit back, relax, and remember, your Kung Fu may be good, but mine is better.
Joining me tonight, martial artist, stunt performer, cinematographer, director. You've seen his work in Avengers Endgame, Zombieland Double Tap. Currently showing off his fight coordinator for an Asgardian god, Marvel's Loki, Loyd Bateman. Loyd, thank you so much for joining the Kung Fu Drive-In Podcast tonight.
My great pleasure. Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
It's great to have you. Loki has been doing amazing. It's been getting some great reviews. How are you liking how it's going so far?
I'm really happy. I'm really happy with the fact that people are digging it. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking when you do a job. You don't know how it's going to turn out. And so I try to focus on the process, and I try to enjoy building and creating and teamwork and all the things that go into it as much as I can, and try not to think too much about the end product. But when it comes out, you always get a little nervous that people may or may not like it, or that they may have, edited the heck out of it and then there's nothing there anymore. You never know. So I'm pretty happy, pretty proud. It's coming together nicely. We're always our own worst critic also, by the way. So there's definitely things that I'd like to fix, but mostly it's the editing, honestly. The cuts are a little tight for my taste. We kind of designed things to let them breathe a little more and have a little bit, wider shots, and it feels a little tight, which kind of bums me out a little bit, but it's working. Well,
let's get into that a little bit since you brought it up, because I talk to a lot of fight coordinators, a lot of stunt coordinators, and they obviously take a lot of pride in designing that action. You go into the previs and you lay it all out, and you have this vision for the action, and then when you hand it over to the editor, you're handing over your baby, and you're trusting that process is going to work out. How much more involved would you want to be so that you get to that point where what you've created is what you see on screen? Well,
let me preface a little bit, because although I'm complaining, Marvel obviously knows what they're doing. They've got a great handle on how this stuff all plays out in the end. And, they have a formula for the way that they pace things that works for what they're doing. And these days, generally, and I think pretty much my whole career, but the ideal that I always have tried to strive for is to be very story oriented anyway, and not try to overdo it with the action, and try very much to sort of incorporate the cast in the process so that they get as much input with where they're at story wise, and whether they have some dialogue that they need to incorporate into it, and help them find the spots where they can do that and emote correctly without having to remember lots of choreo, etc. That being said, we do try to, with the previses, etc., lay out a very simple plan that, in at least in my case, I can't speak for anyone else, it's very shootable for the equipment we know they're going to have on the day, depending on, because cameras that are big and heavy is much different than getting in there with a DSLR and moving around too much. And there's always a tendency to want to do that with the lighter, smaller cameras, is to get very subjective, get very inside. And we do that from time to time, because obviously there's places for it. But the hope, though, is that the simpler you make it, and the more in line with the story, and the more in tune with the characters, the more of it will make the cut in the end, and the less that will get cut out. So we try to not have as much superfluous stuff as possible, but you got to include some cool in there too. You got to get, and you want to put some flavor, but for the most part, that tends to work. But in certain cases, I guess, they just got to take the air out a little bit more than I would like, in order to help the pace of the whole piece move. Yeah. And I do understand that, because I got, a lot of screen time with a bunch of other scenes, and it's not all about the action. It isn't. And when it comes down to it, they got to get their certain number of minutes on the screen efficiently and still tell the story they want to tell overall. And I've been very happy with these episodes, so I can't really complain. But, I wouldn't hate to get in the edit room and just nudge a few pixels here and there, and a couple of frames on the end or the beginning, because I feel like they cut in late and cut out early a little more often than I personally would like. I like things to have a little more overlap, but it's their style. And, like I said, Marvel knows what they're doing.
Well, speaking of Marvel, this isn't your first Marvel project. You've been on a few things with Marvel. So how did you get involved then with Loki?
So Loki came about because specifically I had been doing a show, a James Wan picture, actually a horror flick that's not out yet, called Malignant in Los Angeles. And I had hired Zoe Bell to come on, and the director really liked her and wanted her to be a character. So she ended up just not doing stunts. She ended up acting on it as well. And her and I are good friends, and we were chatting a bunch. And while we were working on that, she said, "Hey, do you know Hank Amos?" And I hadn't honestly worked with him. I knew who he was. Obviously, he was a super famous stunt guy. I hadn't actually worked with him at that point. And she was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And I was like, I said I hadn't, and she's like, "All right." And then a week after I wrapped on the show, Hank called me. He was like, "Hey, I want to bring you out to Atlanta." And again, I was like, "Oh, all right, cool." So he had me come out 2 weeks before Christmas to start prevising a sequence that was part of the series. Just, I imagine just to see how it would go. And things started to land, and it worked out well. We got along really great. The people on the team were awesome. And then as January rolled around, they hired Monique on, and her and I have been great friends since, I think, 2003. So that also was awesome because we got to collaborate again, as we have in the past, on a bunch of different stuff. So, as performers and as, coordinating and fight coordinating and all that. And so it all kind of came together like that.
That's cool. That's cool. Now, you touched on it a little bit, all the action that's going into this. Loki was not a show where I expected to see a lot of hand-to-hand combat. I mean, we're talking about gods here, I not knowing anything about the show and just knowing the mythology of Loki, I was expecting a little bit more magic and things like that. But when you knew that this was Loki, were you expecting to be as involved and as busy as you are?
Frankly, well, it's a very good question, first of all. Frankly, no, I didn't expect it to be as much hand-to-hand. I did think we'd do some more wire work, but they wanted to keep it really grounded. They wanted to keep the characters really sort of connected and in tune and make it feel a little more gritty and realistic, a little more like, these guys are getting into it. And Sylvie being this other character who is not a spoiler anymore. Everybody's been introduced to her now.
Right.
She doesn't really fly around or anything. She can manipulate people and stuff, but she's got a very sort of grounded, we almost kind of wanted to make her like a machete wielding Thai boxer with just like brute force. She just likes to fight. The whole idea behind her was, he's like, "Hey, we got a scrap. Sweet. Let's get into this." She likes headbutting people and getting her hands dirty. She's less of the throwing spells and sending stuff around the room. Loki still has some of that. But he's in it. He's like, "All right, cool. I'm going to get into it with her too. This is great. Fight back to back. Awesome." So, we just sort of went with that concept that they were going to stay on their feet a little more and do less flying around and try to keep them, brawling, especially because the TVA sort of tends to take their powers away too. Right. So they have to kind of come back to this grounded human level in a lot of places. So there's a bunch of fights that take place in the TVA where they can't use any magic at all. So it all has to come down to their physicality. And then off-world, they do a little bit, here and there, but just sort of to enhance it, rather than have them doing these big flying leaps all over the place. We try to keep it a little bit more grounded and down to earth.
Yeah. So on that note, then, was there a particular style you decided to ascribe to the characters? Because Loki's got 2 daggers at one point, and he's looking a little bit Kali-esque. Loki
Tom Hiddleston has a great affinity for kind of the bullfighter, very stoic, tall, reaching, almost balletic style. And that speaks very much to him and how his character and personality are as Loki. And so we sort of built a lot of his stuff off of that and had a lot of fun with him, exaggerating his movements and flowing. And, we did use some Kali sequences as drills and things for him, obviously using the double blades. But for the most part, it was more about trying to have him be like very graceful, and then have, again, Sylvie be a little bit more like, we reference Ong Bak a little bit. I know it's old at this point, but just have her just be like a little more, I'm going to knee the poop out of this person right now. I'm going to roll under here and, kick him in the nuts or whatever. And
Nice.
They cut some of that out, unfortunately, because we had some good nut shots. But just, have her do some eye gouges and be gritty and like a little bit more of a street fighter, which was fun. Because she never lived the God life. She was always hiding, she's always been on the run. So, he comes from this place of this, grace, and she doesn't. She's an underdog. So that was fun to develop. And then some of the other characters too, like the Renslayer character, we had a lot of fun. And you'll see because the episode's out now, but we had, unfortunately, again, they cut it a little bit tighter than I would have liked, because we really had some moments of her doing some very Wong Fei Hung kind of
cool,
more Chinese style stuff.
Yeah.
With her particular weapon, which is like a bigger version of what the timekeepers all carry around, the stick that they use to prune people. Hers is a little longer and has kind of a dagger at the other end of it. So we played around with that quite a bit. And it was cool. It was a cool process to give them each their own style and flavor and, develop each of them.
It's a fascinating thought process. So for you personally, how does a well-traveled son of hotel management professionals get into fight coordinating and stunts? I mean, because you've got Nigeria, South Africa, Canada under your belt. So how does that whole thing go from there to where you are now?
Well, it's an interesting question. My parents are both from the UK, and they both were working in Africa when they met. So that was kind of where that all started. I was born in the UK and then went back to Africa because they were still working there. So I was very little at that time. We immigrated to Canada, and I grew up in Canada, and kind of late in my high school career, and don't take this as you shouldn't do schooling or anything, but my personal journey was I was fed up with school, and I was going to actually drop out and study film. But the film courses in Vancouver Island were not great. And I had seen Capoeira and was super interested in it. And my mom actually, of all things, put on this like eco festival thing that she wanted to do in a theater, and invited this samba group from Vancouver to come over. And they actually did Capoeira in the performance.
Wow.
I was like, oh, wow. It's actually here right in front of me. And then so we talked to them, and I was 17 years old. I decided to leave school, and I moved to Vancouver, and I moved into this place with these Brazilians, and their kids had just arrived. They're like 8 and 9 years old. One of whom you would know, he's very famous now for doing the double Meia Lua knockout that was viral on YouTube, etc. His name's Lelo.
Wow, cool.
But their dad, anyway, was my teacher. And so I lived at their house for a while, and then we started the first Capoeira Academy in Vancouver, in Canada at the time. And I lived in the closet and swept floors and did warm-ups for free training, and, did the whole sleep at the dojo and work for my training. And then we ended up traveling and doing school shows and tours. I went to Brazil a number of times. I learned to speak Portuguese fluently. Went to Brazil, competed in Brazil. Our group grew very quickly. Now it's a huge international group. I unfortunately, we've kind of fallen out since, because obviously I decided at a certain point I wanted to do film work, and they're very all or nothing, the Brazilians. If you know anything about Brazilians, they're very all or nothing, but I love them to death. And at the time, it was just a decision I had to make. I needed to move forwards and grow in the direction that I wanted to go. So when it comes to film, actually, interestingly enough, there's a director, his name's Peter DeLuise, son of Dom DeLuise, who's passed away now. He had seen one of our guys teaching at the community center that he worked out at, and decided he wanted to put it into the TV show that he was directing, Stargate SG-1.
Nice.
And so he came, he had his stunt coordinator, Dan Shea, come over to the school and talk to us and see if a bunch of us wanted to be on the show as extras and do some stuff in the background. And like, yeah, cool. And I took the opportunity to see the stunt guys and talk to the stunt guys and pick their brains about what to do. And they all said the same thing, get a headshot and resume together. Even if you don't have anything, just put some skills together. If you can do some video, even better. Find a legit way to get on set and hand it off to coordinator. So I did some extra work, and I was too shy to do the set hustle with the, show up with a manila envelope, shake hands and walk away thing. I tried to do it more legit. So I had a reason to be there. But at the time we were starting to learn how to shoot and edit, and I actually learned how to shoot and edit stuff doing this very first ever Capoeira DVD that, so I learned how to cut on Final Cut 1, and had been taking all this footage and whatever, and then getting together with some friends and trying to shoot ourselves to send off. We wanted to be in Star Wars. It was in the 90s. So we were like, wanted to be in the new Star Wars films, and sent our stuff to them. And they're like, yeah, thanks. We got people. We're good. Don't worry about it. maybe one day. And then in retrospect, it's funny to be where I am now, but, So, one thing led to the next, and people were like, oh, it's pretty cool. You can actually do some stuff. I got back onto Stargate, and the director had seen that I'd been hustling a little bit and was like, yeah, we're going to have another stunt guy right here, and it's going to be Loyd. And I was like, oh, shit. So he gave me a shot, kind of, got the guy to upgrade me to stunt contract. And I did. So I worked in Vancouver for about 10 years. It was hard. Like I got the first one. It took a year to get another job. And then, slowly it built up. But I did a decade in Vancouver before I met my wife and we moved to LA. Cool. Had a couple of kids and, was living over there. And then I got a call from Sam Hargrave because he was doing some prep for Avengers. And he said, hey, if you want to come out, we'll do a couple of months prep. See how it goes. And at that point, I just made this decision, like, I'm going to try and prove to them that they can't live without me. So I worked hard and did the best I could and managed to stay on the show for a little over 18 months, I think it was. It was almost 2 years worth of working on the Avengers. And then things just snowballed from there, really. But yeah, this is my 21st year doing stunts. And
that's awesome.
I would say about 5 or 6 years I've been, slowly getting more and more into coordinating and fight coordinating.
Yeah.
So how much of your capoeira training translated directly into your stunt work? Because stunts encompasses so many things. You got stunt driving and burns and, and fights and all that. So you were recruited because of your capoeira skills. How much of that continued to translate?
A great deal, honestly, because the body awareness and sparring and everything that we do in capoeira, and, you should look up some videos of like tough rodas in Brazil, because it's not really like everybody sees shows and they think, they're just flipping around or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than that. But honestly, like the distance and timing and reactions and flipping and falling all played in. It was a really good base to have. Movement wise, for me, it's a little bit like parkour. Like it's very specific to look at. And if you don't have like the right look, like Latif Crowder, for example, looks like he should be doing capoeira and people really like that, play into the whole stereotype of it. For me, it didn't really work quite as well. So I had to adapt a lot and try to pick up other things as well. And, luckily I learned relatively quickly and I was able to adapt to a lot of stuff. But I would say from the standpoint of like, being able to get kicked hard and fall down and get up and keep going, that was an important thing because we get, our training was hard. My master was a tough guy. Mestre Bahang was a tough guy. He didn't put up with a lot of weakness. He didn't put up with it. Like, he didn't care, get up, let's go, keep going. I think I broke a rib. So you can sleep later. You're going to be fine. So there's, that kind of having to push through pain barriers was important because the stunt thing is interesting because there's a lot of that. It's not that world anymore. It's not the, cowboys and, tying a rope off to a tree and getting yanked off horses as much as it used to be. There's still an aspect of that. And toughness is very important, especially mental toughness. You got to be able to push through a lot of boundaries and barriers. It is a magic show. It's all about designing and creating the safest version of everything that you can. Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff where you look at it and you're like, this is going to hurt. And you just got to do it. That's what it's for. It's, it is what it is. But so I learned a lot of that perseverance. That is a very difficult thing, I think, for a lot of people. It's like, it was hard to do, so I stopped. Perseverance was a huge thing for me from capoeira that I learned from that. The physicality, of course, is important. Being able to learn to flip and not being afraid to flip and fall on hard floors. Like we trained on concrete, we trained on hardwood floors. We didn't really use a lot of mats. We would, if we wanted to practice bigger things and whatever, we would roll out a wrestling mat or whatever, but very infrequently. For the most part, everything was hard floor, barefoot, no pads. You fall down, just get up and go. So a lot of that stuff was very useful.
Sure.
I wouldn't recommend it necessarily because I believe in longevity and I believe in taking care of yourself. And I believe also in something I was never very good at was the self-care thing. Like take yourself to the doctor, take yourself to the physio and chiro, take care of that stuff. I think that for younger performers, if this is an advice piece, very much so take care of yourselves because you want to have a long, healthy career. You don't want to be limping around looking like RoboCop because you got all kinds of, broken joints and whatever. Take care of yourself for sure. But they were good lessons for me and they were things that I needed in order to help me get into this for sure. When it comes to other things like driving, etc., those aren't really my specialty by any means, but it definitely having body awareness and, using your full peripheral and all that, etc., is useful for those things. So you can learn them quickly, but every different skill there's no shortcut.
Yeah.
You're not going to become a great driver just because you go to the gym and punch a lot. It's never going to happen. You have to get you got to seat time. It's got to, 10,000 hours behind the wheel to be able to do those things. The guys and women who are the best drivers in the world, they focus exclusively on that. And, they can do other physical stuff, of course, but their main focus is that, and they've done it their whole lives. So definitely any other aspect of the industry, doing a fire burn is not such a big deal. You got to have a great team around you who all know what they're doing and they can coach you through it. And then, you can safely come out the other side. You have to, again, be very on point. If you get claustrophobic or whatever, it can be very, very dangerous and very difficult. Fire is one of those funny things that if it goes really well, you're like, oh, that was easy. But if it goes badly, you're effed. Like, it's not something you can mess with. It's something that it's going to do severe damage. So
sure.
Again, proper team, proper prep, patience, not letting anybody rush it. And they always want to rush it. And it's usually last up. And, so those things are very, very, very important to know and to understand. So to backtrack to your question, how did that help me with other aspects of it? It didn't. Everything comes from a place of learning, but you typically don't get a chance to learn all of those things like wire work and whatever until you get into the business and find a place or get opportunities on set to do it. So I would say that my training led me to the opportunity to get in there and start to learn all those other things, and explore those other things. But that's really all there is to it, because there's no shortcut.
Yeah. Capoeira is such a beautiful art too. And like you were saying, most of us know just the showier parts of it. Like I was introduced to it through Mark Dacascos' movie.
Right.
Exactly. Only the Strong. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's 1992, I think the trailer.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So,
I got to work with him years later, by the way, which was awesome.
Nice. That's cool. But like you saw the real thing, and I mean, you got to experience the real thing. What was it about Capoeira that held your interest for so long?
It's an amazing, deep cultural experience. Maybe partly because I lived in Africa as a child and I had an affinity for that type of music, the drumming, percussion, the berimbau and the singing, very rhythmic, very chant-like, and so interesting. The history and culture of it is so deep that was very, very inspiring. Initially, of course, when I was young, it was about, oh, that's cool looking movements. I want to do that. But what kept me going for almost 15 years was, all the rest of the music and culture and the people. Brazil is such a vibrant, crazy, out there, wild, sometimes very happy, sometimes very miserable place. There's a lot of poverty. There's a big disparity between rich and poor. And so there's a lot of surface happiness with like deep pain. Mm-hmm. And Capoeira is an amazing way to help people who are suffering to find something that they can dedicate to. And so I found that super inspiring. My master, for example, was one of those guys, who's living in they call them favelas. They're on the hillside and it's all very, very poor. They're very basically one-room shacks, very small houses, kids with nothing better to do but, rob and steal and whatever because they're broke. You hear terrifying stories about what happens to these kids. And so from police and otherwise and gang violence and so on and so forth. But as something that, in his case, he found that he could latch onto and that he could grow within, and it gave him the opportunity to leave the country and start his own group and then grow that group into an internationally successful group is super inspiring, And so a lot of that is what kept me going. It's just, and martial arts in general, I think, do that for a lot of people who find it. It gives them something to really get out of their head and get away from real violence and focus their energy on something that's disciplined. And, even though you're learning to fight, you're learning to take care. You're learning to care for those who you're with. You're learning control. You're learning discipline. That for me, for martial arts in general, is huge. It's a huge deal. And Capoeira in particular, I find that plus having the whole cultural side of it and the music side of it and the other related dances and percussion and music is super inspiring. And I can't wait to go back to Brazil, honestly. It's an amazing country.
Yeah, it sounds it. Now, from what I understand, Tom Hiddleston is a Capoeira student too. Is that true?
It's funny. I didn't talk to him about Capoeira ever, but
Really?
Interestingly enough, I just finished fight coordinating Hawkeye, and one of the directors, the Berts, they're called, these two women directors, one of the directors does Capoeira, and she was like teaching Zoom classes from our training area.
Wow.
So that's kind of funny. But yeah, I actually didn't know if Tom had ever trained Capoeira.
That's cool. So how is his movement then in terms of coordinating them?
He's very coordinated. He learns very quickly, and he drills. He's not afraid to do it 1,000 times.
Cool.
And he'll go slow and move through it. And, frankly, Sophia, she'd be done, like totally cooked. And he's like, just a few more. And she's like, oh my God, I can't do any more of these. Like, he would just keep going and going. He has an amazing amount of stamina. In fact, before every take of everything, he'll do like 20 squats, 10 push-ups, and sprint 100 meters back and forth, and then do the take.
Wow.
Every time.
Wow.
All day long. He's sprinting and running and doing
Seriously?
Seriously. All day. And I'm not just talking about on the fight days. He does it on the regular acting days too. He'll jump up and do a bunch of squats and push-ups and then do the scene.
That's impressive.
It's pretty crazy. He's
cool.
Massively strong and tons of stamina. It's great.
It must be nice to have an actor that is willing to put in that effort and go beyond to really bring the action that you're designing to life, because it makes it so much more appreciable, as a fan.
Absolutely. And, you can do so much more with them because they're in it. It's their face the whole time. You get actors who are just like, I can do this. Punt it off the second unit. No, just let the double do it. And it's really annoying because you're like, why? We got you here right now. We've worked hard. Like, why? I know you're tired, but we're all tired. Let's just do this.
Yeah.
So it was pretty great.
That's cool.
He put in a ton of work. So did Sophia, by the way. She worked her butt off. And here's the thing. When we started the show, she had just had a baby a month prior, and she had never trained martial arts of any kind in her life. So she was fresh. It was actually really good timing for COVID to hit, because she took that time to recover and strengthen herself. And she would do Zoom training with her double Sarah. They would connect and work on stuff. And so by the time she came back, she was in great shape and ready to go and worked hard. It was awesome. Like, they both put in a ton of work. It was
That's
really
great.
cool.
That's great.
And again, as a fan, I appreciate seeing the actors really go all out and being able to watch them do it. It just makes it cooler. It makes it so much cooler.
Way cooler. It's way cooler when the actors are doing it themselves, and you can tell that they've put in the work. Yeah. And you're not cutting from a tight shot of them gritting and then a wide shot of a double and jumping back. Like, there's so many times where they cheat that stuff, and it's like, I don't buy it. Especially when right? It's fine if you don't really care. But when and you're looking, you're like, they just cut into the actor's face there because they didn't use them at all.
It sucks. It does. And for those of us that follow the genre, it takes us out of it so quickly and so drastically. You're like, really? Did you have?
That's another reason why I try to push for longer takes of stuff, because they're doing it and you don't have to cut out so frequently. So when I was talking a little bit earlier about being a bit bummed about how fast the pace of the cuts were in the fights, there are definitely sections where these actors are doing the fight for a lot longer with a lot more chunks and doing it great in wider frames. So it bummed me out because, again, they put the work in so that they could do that. And it's unfortunate to lose that a little bit.
Well, maybe we can get a second season out of it. We'll see.
They're already signed for season 2.
What? You can't talk. Can you even say that?
Yep.
That's amazing.
Season 2 for sure. I think all the Marvel series are going to get at least 2 seasons. I don't really think that's rocket science, so I'm pretty sure my NDA won't kill me for that.
That's awesome.
Legal, they won't come calling. But I mean, all those shows are going to have a couple of seasons for sure.
That's cool. All right. So then back to your stuff. Then beyond coordinating, you've done some producing, you've done some directing. Is that the natural next step for you?
That's my goal. It's always been an interest of mine, and I spent a lot of years trying to do I'll shoot my own indie picture, but it's kind of a groundwork laid for backdooring it now, and work hard on set, and opportunities are there with a lot of the new stuff that's coming up. So I'm kind of back at focusing on going up the ladder rather than trying to do my own thing. So yeah, I do love to do that, and I'm hoping to get there. I have a couple of steps I got bridges to cross, we'll call them in the meantime, but that's definitely my goal for sure.
what kind of stuff do you want to do then? Are you going to be more? Are you going to continue more with the action stuff, or do you have other stories that you want to tell?
I love action, but I love good dramas too. I'm a huge Kubrick fan. I love, I watch a lot of Tarkovsky stuff. I like all the artistic, artsy fartsy stuff. I'm all about it. So, we'll see. We'll see. There will be action in it. Don't get me wrong. There will be action in it. But do I want to stick to just martial arts action? Not necessarily. Yeah. I think I'm going to try and spread it out and do a variety of things. Okay. And definitely like to focus on it being good dramatically. And you know what? I also like doing action comedy. I think that's pretty fun too. Oh yeah. So yeah, nice. There's a world where I would do a little of that too. Yeah, maybe a little bit Coen Brothers style. Do the flip flop back and forth. One where the comedy is a backdrop and one where it's the main feature. Cool. Mix it up a little bit. Very cool, definitely. Man. That's my goal for sure.
That's a nice eclectic mix there. So, are there examples of good action, martial arts derived action, or otherwise that is in the mix today that you look to and be like, these are the guys that are doing it right?
Oh, 8711 for sure. Chad Stahelski, Dave Leitch, JJ Perry now, those guys for sure. They're the ones.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sam a lot of good stuff coming. Yeah. 1,000,000%. Oh, dude. Extraction 2 is going to be awesome.
Extraction was so much fun.
It was great. Right? Yeah. No, those guys are doing it right for sure.
Yeah, I had Mike Lear on the show to talk about that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He was great. He was great.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. So then tell me then what is next on the plate for you personally?
I'm going to go next week, actually. I drive down to Mississippi, and I'm going to do an Aaron Eckhart picture where he's kind of a washed-up underdog fighter. He used to be really great. Now he's alcoholic, gambled everything away. His mom's in hospice and he's about to lose the house. And he basically, there's a bunch of people looking for him. He's got to get enough money together. So he wins a decent amount gambling and he goes to pay his debt, but he gets jacked and all this stuff happens. Anyway, by the end of the show, he's got to have one all out to the death fight, basically, with this cracked out young freaky dude. So it's kumite at the end.
Nice.
It'll be good. So we're gonna go start boot camp, get Aaron in shape, and do a bunch of training with him, get him where he needs to be, and then shoot this film. So that'll take us through the end of August, and then after that, I got another Marvel picture that I'm aiming to do, which I can't talk about.
Oh, another Marvel picture. So it's one of those Phase 4 type movies. Good enough. All right. And last question. Your first name is Loyd. It is spelled Loyd, which I think is the correct way to spell it. So,
usually it's 2 L's.
I know.
The original Welsh, but I preferred with one. My parents were hippies, I guess. I don't know. Whatever. Cool. They decided they didn't want the Welsh because it's Cloyd in the original Welsh pronunciation. And for whatever reason, I guess they had a thing about that. And, whatever. So they went with 1 L.
Nice. That's very cool.
Trying to be original.
Well, because my name is Jeff, but it's spelled Jeof. You'll never see that spelling again. Ever.
Well,
anywhere.
My middle name is Jeffrey, but it's Geoffrey.
Oh, see, there you go.
Andrew Jeffrey. It's very English. Loyd Andrew Jeffrey.
Very cool.
Loyd Bateman, thank you so much for taking some time to talk. You are an awesome dude. The action for Loki is fantastic. I'm looking forward to everything that you bring to the rest of the series, and I'll be looking for much more of your work
going forward. Man.
Cool, man. I appreciate it. Thank you. Also, keep an eye out for
nice.
We did that this year as well.
Very cool.
Heidi Moneymaker and myself and the team, and we all. Hopefully that one will turn out pretty great as well. It was a fun storyline, and the cast are awesome in that too. So,
well, yeah, like you said, Marvel knows what they're doing, and they have hit it out of the park every time. So, congratulations! You're bringing some good stuff to Loki. So, let's see so much more of it.
Thank you so much. Listen,
stay safe. Enjoy. You're in Pittsburgh now, so enjoy Pittsburgh and be safe, brother.
Great. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Talk to you soon.
Huge thank you to Loyd Bateman for setting aside some time to chat. I'm really enjoying Loki so far. He's doing some fantastic work, and it was great to hear his take on how the action comes together. Now, I hope he doesn't get into any trouble for talking about Season 2, but if it's true, I hope at least he comes back to keep pushing the fight scenes to the next level. Otherwise, watch for his work on Hawkeye as well, because that looks like it's going to be another winner for Marvel. And of course, best of luck to Loyd and all his other endeavors going forward. Give him a follow on his Instagram, at Loyd Bateman with 1 L, because as we learned from Lego Ninjago movie, the other way is pronounced Lloyd. But drop Loyd a note and let him know that you heard him right here on the Kung Fu Drive-In podcast. Because after all, the brightest stars shine at the drive-in. Until next time, Poison Clan. Peace.
Poison Clan rocks the world.
Walking to the tea house, ready for some action. Drink a little wine, we getting drunk and then we're fighting. Ha! This time it's war. We smash the place up with a dragon claws. We're walking to the tea house, ready for some action. Drink a little wine, we getting drunk and then we're fighting. Ha! This time it's war. We smash the place up with a dragon claws. I see the iron-fisted monk upon the daily prayers. Shaolin monks on the hands running down the thousand stairs. The fatally Khan now's in King Yu's hands. With the fearless Aida roaming over the land. Yeah, the little bitch soldier is older and wiser. He wants a world of peace because he doesn't want to fight, yo. Got the venom mob laying down the law. Bruce Lee delivered kicks guaranteed to graze jaws. Fight for the cause, then pause, hear applause. Not the end back kicks will defeat the outlaws. Very good, but balls don't hit back. Yeah, the death jewels here, David D is coming back. The Tai Chi master, Jet Li's even faster. Could chat a little drink because he is the drunken master. Once upon a time in China, Rosamund Kwan is real fine, but see Maggie show your spine. Golden Swallow was arrived. Shang-Chi movies, will the hero will survive? We got the brave archer make his way to the top of the mountain, gonna fight, may as well pick the spot. Yeah, the sky goes black, cause the vampire's back. We got Lam Ching Ying to kill them all, so stand back. You place the black magic on the soul of the sword, and our sword will travel until his body's on floors. Yeah, Wing Chun, Shaolin and Mantis style. Yeah, defeat the enemy and watch him run for miles. Blood will spill now on the mountain tops when we bring back the soul of the legendary Pops. Walking to the tea house, ready for some action. Drink a little wine, we're getting drunk and then we're fighting. Ha! This time it's war. We smash the place up with a dragon claws. We're walking to the tea house, ready for some action. Drink a little wine, we're getting drunk and then we're fighting. Ha! This time it's war. We smash the place up with a dragon claws.
See, it's a game of death, yo. You're facing the big boss. It's once upon a time in China, counting the tick-tock. The shogun, assassins, like some blood, or just drip drop. The head kick, neck chop, violence that won't stop. Wanna kill Bill, better get the assassins. He's got Irma just in yellow, but she isn't the dragon, but in the tea rooms. That's where it'll happen. She got the bodies on the floor. When the blood, it'll splatter against the wall. No fear at all, to kill them all. There's always blood spilled when you head into a war. Fearless, unleashed. The fist of legend that they call Jet Li. I'm Bolo Young, yo, will always be a beast. You rumble in the Bronx, yo, will rumble in the streets. And it's simple, see the facts are these. There's only ever gonna be one Bruce Lee.
Walking to the tea house, ready for some action. Drink a little wine, we're getting drunk and then we're fighting. Ha! This time it's war. We smash the place up with a dragon claws. We're walking to the tea house, ready for some action. Drink a